Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/entitled Parent Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen refused to clean up our mess, so I tried to get her fired. After that, entitled Friend learns to choose their words carefully. And after that, your contract is almost up. You should start looking for other jobs. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen gets fired. Good luck finding someone else who's willing to sit here listening to you all day, Reddit boy. So please smash that like button. And if you're new, subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen refused to clean up our mess, so I tried to get her fired. My wife and I were out of town getting ready to celebrate Father's Day, which is tomorrow. Anyway, my parents' house was already packed with relatives gathering for the occasion, and there was no way we were going to sleep on the floor in a house full of people. So my wife and I ended up going to a hotel in the area not too far away from my parents' house. So we booked a room and spent a couple of nights there. My wife was feeling ill all day yesterday and ended up throwing up twice. Second time, she couldn't get to the bathroom in time, so it happened near the bed. She had a big dinner despite feeling sick, and well, the carpet was an absolute mess. The bed sheets caught some of it as well. I immediately called the hotel's housekeeper. She was so young, I think around 19 to 28 years of age, to come and clean up. She took forever before finally arriving. She looked shocked upon discovering that it was throw up that she had to clean up and looked up at me and said, "Ew, gross," and asked if I called her to clean that. I said yes. She complained that I didn't tell her she had to clean this stuff up and said that she was sorry, but she wouldn't come near that. I was confused, and I told her that she could get someone else to do it instead, but she replied that if she asked others to do her job for her, then they would hold it over her head. She then tried to hand me the tools to do it myself, while she waited from a distance. I said, absolutely not. She replied it was my wife's throw-up, so I shouldn't react the way I did. I saw my wife looking at me. I flipped out and told her it's her job that she gets paid for. I said I was going straight to the hotel manager for poor service, and she starts freaking out, begging me to let it go. I told her to get out, but she kept whining about getting possibly fired this time, and said her dad won't be happy on Father's Day if she loses her job. My wife felt sorry for her and wanted to clean it up herself, but I insisted she gets rest. I spoke to the manager, who apologized and sent an older housekeeper, but I still left a bad review on the hotel. We checked out this morning, and my brother was able to find us another hotel. My wife says she couldn't help but think about that young lady who I called the manager on for having a natural reaction to throw up that she couldn't control. I said that she's a housekeeper and she should expect to do these kinds of things. My wife thinks I was too hard on her and shouldn't have overreacted and potentially got her fired. I couldn't help but think about what she said. So, am I the jerk? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the housekeeper? Please let us know. Bruh. Entitled Friend learns to choose their words carefully. Backstory. I had a friend who we'll call Josh, which is obviously not his actual name. Josh and I had been friends since we were young. Turns out, liking Transformers, wrestling, and Hot Wheels makes it really easy to make friends in elementary school, or primary school for those on the other side of the Atlantic. Josh originally was a pretty good guy, but his parents had issues with one another and eventually split up. His mother remarried, and his stepfather began to spoil Josh rotten. Josh began to become a lot more antagonistic, and we grew distant as the years went on, but I tried to remain friendly with him, hoping he'd eventually see the error of his ways. He went through multiple relationships, all of them ending by his hand, but I was unaware as he only spoon-fed me information and made the other party look like they were in the wrong. The incident. Josh had recently had a breakup with a girl who we'll be calling Megan, who I was friendly with before the breakup. Whilst I was worried about Megan due to us being friends, I stupidly decided to check on Josh first. Now, I had let Josh borrow stuff from me, including multiple gaming consoles, clothes, and even a few bits of furniture. I tried to be a good friend, but I didn't know that I was being taken advantage of. We had decided to order some pizza, and Josh had unwittingly ordered from local pizza, where Megan worked. Local pizza doesn't deliver. Josh persuaded me to go and get the pizza, In reality, he basically demanded it because he was too lazy to drive that way. I decided to bite the bullet and just drive my way to the local pizza and walked inside. Lo and behold, I met with Megan, who was on break at the moment. Megan and I spoke about things and the topic of Josh came up. It was busy and our order wasn't even done yet, so I didn't mind stopping to chat until Megan began to tell me her side of things. It turned out Josh had been a major jerk to Megan until Megan's brother, Drake, stepped in and pulled his sister out of the relationship. Drake had been a friend as well, but Josh had fed me lies, so I stopped speaking to Drake. I didn't want to believe Megan at first until she called Drake, who corroborated her story. It was a lot to swallow. Josh's breakups began to make a lot more sense now, and I felt sick. Was I friends with a horrible person? I asked Megan some questions, and she told me her side of the story and ended up calling out a lot of Josh's flat-out lies. After the pizza was done, I promised Megan that I'd talk to Josh about this as someone who'd been close to him for years. She thought that maybe I'd be able to get through to him. Oh, were we both wrong. I got back to Josh's and just spoke about things until I managed to get on the topic of Megan. I mentioned to him that we spoke and what she had said. Big mistake. He got angry and called Megan a lying jerk and declared that I shouldn't believe her. I told him that Drake corroborated her story and that I was going through a lot of stress trying to make heads or tails of all of this. Josh, now absolutely livid, screams at me.
Shut up! Get out! You want to believe them? Take your stuff and go.
I was shocked. I tried to say something, but Josh cut me off.
I said get out. Take your stuff and get out of my house. You want to believe her and that stupid brother of hers? Fine. Tell everyone how much of a horrible person I am. Let's see who believes you.
Malicious compliances. Yep, you read that right, dear reader. Compliances, plural. Now, whilst I'm not a big fan of confrontation, I also despise being yelled at. He wants me to take my stuff and go? So be it. I just give him an, okay Josh, I'll take my things and go. So I began to take it all back. Gaming consoles, clothes, and I even grabbed the stand-up mirror I'd let him borrow ages ago. He tried to stop me multiple times, but I simply pushed past him and reiterated his words. He wanted me to shut up, grab my things, and go. So I did. PS2 I let him borrow? Taking that back. GameCube he borrowed so he could play some games he got at a thrift store. That's mine. Taking that home. I took everything that was mine, packed it into my car, and ignored him as he screamed, ranted, and raved at me, threatening to call the police. I simply dared him to, as I was only taking back my things. When I left, I called Megan and Drake and told them what happened. They said they had my back in case things went awry after this. Then I let them in on the second thing he said.
Tell everyone how much of a horrible person I am.
Okay, Josh, bet. Megan, Drake, and I went through our contacts for anyone who knew Josh and told them what happened. One of these people was Josh's own mother, who was absolutely livid at him as Josh was living in his home on his mother and stepfather's dime. The fallout. Josh's reputation pretty much collapsed out from under him as evidence came to light, and Josh's various exes, emboldened by Megan and Drake coming out with their stories, began to spread their own stories on what had happened. Josh's friend circle turned on him rather quickly, finding out how much of a jerk he actually was. What made all of this worse for Josh was all of these stories had evidence, such as text, camera footage, and audio recordings, all of this evidence making it obvious that those Josh heard weren't lying. Josh's mother and stepfather ended up pulling his sizable allowance due to this, and he couldn't afford his home, so he was forced to move back in with them. Josh and I still don't talk anymore, and he had to sell off a lot of his furniture and personal possessions to pay off the debt he had managed to rack up after his allowance was pulled. I've heard that Josh has changed and is getting better, but after this crap he put me through, I'd rather be keeping my distance. Your contract is almost up. You should start looking for other jobs. First, a little background story. Doug works for one of the larger banks here in Canada. For someone without post-secondary, he's done incredibly well for himself. He's 28 now and has been working with this bank for almost 9 years. He started as a teller and worked his way all the way up to just below a branch manager, but more customer service oriented. This story starts February 2020 right as lockdown was starting to snowball here. Doug had worked in a few different branches over the years and is quite personable. When a former colleague told him about a position in the wealth department, he thought it might be a good for a change. It was also work from a small office downtown, which meant he didn't have to go into a branch every day and deal with customers and employees face to face. He decided to apply. With a good recommendation, he got an interview. How this position works is he essentially would be working directly for two big investment banker types, but there was an office manager, we'll call her Sarah, who he also reported to as well. This office manager trained him, provided support, etc. During the interview, he was told that the base salary for the new position was $10,000 per year less, but there was monthly bonuses paid out that would bring him well over the salary cap for his previous position. Once he accepted, it didn't really sit well with me since he didn't get that in writing. He got along wonderfully with his investment banker bosses. They loved having someone so personable who also had connections in the branch. The divisions were kept pretty church and state, retail and wealth, so it saved a lot of time having Doug around since he could just message friends from retail to get information without having to go through all of the typical hoops. He also knew most of the systems already and got all of the courses he needed very quickly. Once lockdown got bad, offices were shut down. Everyone had to work from home. Since Doug was new, he got kind of done over. He was one of the last people to get a laptop. You can't use your own. Had one monitor. Regularly got stuck going into the office to mail things. Also, since he was new, he had a lot of questions and needed help regularly. With work from home, that meant Sarah had to put in a lot of effort to answer his questions. She was a miserable person. She was condescending, took a long time to answer him, or would just say, "Figure it out." It was incredibly frustrating for Doug, especially considering the bonus he was receiving was a fraction of what he was promised. He was making considerably less money and was doing a lot more work. After about a year, February 2021 at this point, Doug was doing very well at his position. The investment bankers regularly praised him, and they even got him fancy Christmas gifts. The only downside was Sarah. She was still giving Doug a very hard time and just generally being rude and condescending. When Doug's 1 year rolled around, Sarah had a meeting with him about some issues a client was having. At the end of the meeting, she said, "Since your contract renewal is coming up, you might want to consider keeping your options open and looking for some other positions in other departments." We both knew this was an empty threat since his actual bosses basically needed him at this point. One of them started having some pretty serious health issues, and Doug was a superstar helping him through it while maintaining his book of business. We knew this was just Sarah trying to make him feel small. Even still, Doug was pretty upset after hearing this. He had been putting in 12-hour days for less money and was borderline being bullied by Sarah the entire time. So he decided to take her advice. He sent out one application to a different division of the bank. Got a call back the same day. Turns out the lady who runs this division for our province used to work with Doug. She was his branch manager back when he was a teller. With this bank, in order to move to other departments, they touch base with your current boss. They spoke to both of his investment banker bosses, and they were taken by total surprise. They called Doug to see why he was quitting since he was doing so well. They had no idea Sarah had promised him more money in the interview and that he took a pay cut to be there. They had no idea Sarah had been treating him the way she had been since they didn't interact with her often. A day or two later, he had a Zoom meeting with the investment banker bosses and Sarah. They tried to counter-offer him the same salary, $17,000 more per year, and Sarah changed her tune completely. Tried to backpedal on what she said about looking for other positions. Doug politely declined their offer and accepted the new position, partly because he felt taken advantage of since they were so easily able to give him almost a $20,000 pay raise, but also because he didn't feel secure in the position due to Sarah's remarks. His investment banker bosses still call him regularly, 4 months later, to help with clients. Some of their clients only want to speak with Doug, or they need Doug's help with systems he designed to make their lives easier. Now Doug works from home still, makes $17,000 more per year than he did in the wealth department, and his investment banker bosses pay him a few hundred a week for his freelance work. Oh, and the best of it all is that Sarah took on all of Doug's duties for months while they found his replacement. Doug's investment banker bosses told him their new assistant is someone who worked in the mailroom at the office. He took 3 attempts to pass his exams and has no idea what he's doing. Have you ever had a coworker bully you? If so, what did you do about it? Please let us know.
You bully me all the time by making me listen to all these stories.
It finally happened. Entitled parents demanded my print. Honestly, I've never ran into a Karen or an entitled person before, but I finally had my run-in today with an entitled young couple. On with the story. So I had bought a nice print made by an artist located in Georgia, USA, a couple months ago, and have finally got it framed properly by Hobby Lobby. I like their services. And since this was my very first piece of artwork that wasn't some $10 poster, I wanted to go all out and make it look nice. However, a half hour ago, I went in to pick it up and it turned out beautifully. But there was another young couple sort of lurking around the pictures and framing area of the store, and I could see them looking at me and my new print, which was being bagged by the very nice framing lady. Honestly, Hobby Lobby, your employees are so sweet and helpful. As it was being bagged, they approached and looked at my print, commenting how nice it was and asking where I got it, etc. Being an introvert, but also enjoying conversation, I told them my little tale about how I got it, and they thanked me. All is well, right? Wrong. A few minutes later, the framing lady got called elsewhere and left me and my framed print with a half-finished receipt, so I waited and hopped on my phone to answer some emails and texts from work. I work from home sometimes, but as I looked up, there was the entitled wife picking up my print, with entitled husband standing behind her marveling at it. Me. Hey, could y'all please put my print down? This was a lot of money to do, and it's my first piece of artwork ever.
Oh, hush. I'm just looking at it. I'm not hurting it now, am I?
Me. Yeah, you are. You could potentially break the backing, which is just paper, and then I'd have to get it fixed, and I don't have all day to be here. Please put my property down. Entitled husband stands between us.
Look, kid, we want this painting, and we just got married 6 months ago, and we could really use something nice to go in our bedroom to commemorate our 6-month anniversary.
Me. It's not for sale, sir. I don't want to have to go back to Georgia to buy a new one. Go find the artist yourself. I gave you his name.
I don't care. You bought it before. You can buy it again.
At this point, she was causing a scene, and entitled husband was constantly blocking my way to save precious print. Then finally, the nice lady at Hobby Lobby came back. Nice lady. Excuse me, that's his. Entitled husband.
No, he stole it from us and is trying to claim it's his. We found this here in the store first, and he just wants it for himself.
Karen.
Yeah, we found it a few aisles down.
Me. They're lying. You know I came in here 2 weeks ago for this print, ma'am. The nice lady then looks at me and nods with a smirk. Nice lady. So, you two claim that you found this in my store, correct? The couple almost in unison.
Yup.
Nice lady. Well then, you would know that we don't sell anything with an artist's signature. But if you really do claim it's yours, then what's the artist's name? Neither of them could give an answer. Then I chime in to give the right one. Sorry, I'm not going to advertise the artist's name here out of respect for him. Then the nice lady simply told both of them to leave the store immediately or else she would have them trespassed. And since it was in a strip mall area, that means they would have been trespassed from the entire mall area. Sadly, they didn't escalate it like most stories, but it was nice to see some very entitled people get their just desserts. Performance review metrics in retail fail to consider that an entry-level employee might possess basic math skills. I used to work at a department store where the majority of sales volume came from clothing, and the primary target customer was women in their 30s and 40s. The raises there were based on a performance review, and at my first one, I got a 3% raise. So for the next year, I busted my butt in hopes of getting the maximum possible raise of 5% at my next review. Well, when the time came, despite having a very good review, I probably had the highest scores out of the 5 or so people in my department, the customer service desk, I still only received a 3% raise. I was devastated. After leaving the office, I headed up to the break room and looked over the metrics in more detail. That's when I noticed that a full 30% of my review score came from the store's averaging score on the customer satisfaction surveys that print out with every receipt. Now, this particular company does not offer any incentive whatsoever to its customers, like 5 random respondents each month will win a $50 gift card to take the surveys, and you had to fill them out within a fairly short time period after your trip. I think it was 24 to 48 hours. So even though we had hundreds of customers come through the store every single day, we only received around 20 to 25 survey responses per week, so 3 or 4 per day. And of course, without any incentive to complete them, a customer who had had a bad experience would be far more likely to submit a survey than usual. In fact, I remember once or twice having a manager who had just denied a grumpy Karen's demands discreetly tell me, "Don't give her the survey slip." So, although we delivered a 5 out of 5 experience with 99% of all of our customers, the store's customer service score frequently fell in the range of 60 to 80%, varying wildly from one week to the next. Sure, there were times when our rolling weekly average would hit 100% for a few days, but I could never bring myself to reach the level of excitement over these occurrences that the managers tried to drum up in our morning huddles, knowing that it really just boiled down to us being lucky that whoever hadn't been 100% satisfied during that time period had just not bothered to fill out the survey. In statistics terms, the sample size of this survey was far too small to produce anything resembling an accurate representation of our true customer service performance. While I've never taken a statistics class, I have a passing interest in the subject, and based on the limited knowledge I've acquired throughout my life, I'd speculate that the margin of error for this survey score was probably on the order of 10 to 20 percentage points. This meant that nearly a third of my total review score was based on what was, essentially, a random number. So I continued to look over the various factors of the performance review score and their associated weights, and I reached a few enlightening conclusions. First, even if I got a perfect score on everything that could directly control all of the factors related to individual performance, the only way I could reach that 5% tier was for the store's survey scores for the year to average 90% or more. An annual average of anything under 75% would earn just 2 out of 5 points on the review. Our store's annual average was usually in the low 80s. Secondly, as hard as I had worked on performing all of my individual performance metrics over the past year, I had gotten 4 out of 5 points on most of them, with only a couple 5 out of 5s. This still left me several points short of the threshold for even the 4% raise. So I did some calculations and determined that if, over the next year, I discontinued all attempts to impress my managers, put forth only as much effort as the employees that were college students, and just showed up on time for all of my shifts, I'd end up with all 2s and 3s on my next review. But the store's survey score would actually help my score enough to still qualify me for a 3% raise. So that's exactly what I did. I stopped trying to do things as quickly as possible and instead worked at a pace that would avoid breaking a sweat. And mind you, for some reason the store was always around 76 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit, so this meant I actually moved even more slowly than is my natural inclination, which tends to be a bit faster than your average person. When working a cashier shift, I stopped proactively scanning the spare copies of the coupons that were kept at each cash register for the various 15% off everything coupons that were constantly sent out in the mail for every customer who came through my line. We were allowed, mildly encouraged, but certainly not required to do this. Instead, only scanning it for folks who explicitly asked if I had it. If I wasn't working at a register where it would be blatantly obvious, I'd spend 20 to 25 minutes on my 15-minute breaks. When working a shift on the sales floor, instead of working diligently and methodically to straighten up every shelf and table, I'd just spend enough time on the worst ones to get them looking reasonably decent, then spend an hour or two just walking laps around the store, looking like I was on my way somewhere, stopping only when a customer flagged me down. Whenever I was working directly with a customer, I'd still provide great customer service, but for everyone else, I was just phoning it in. Sure enough, a year later, the comments on my review were a lot more critical than they had ever been, and yet I once again had a 3% raise. That raise was oh so much more rewarding than any of the previous ones had been. This became my status quo for the rest of the time I worked there, until I landed a full-time tech support job and said sayonara to retail once and for all. I distinctly remember when I turned in my notice, the store manager said, "Well, we'll miss you. If you ever want to come back for some extra cash around the holidays or anything, we'll bring you back on at the same rate you have now." I was making $8.43, while the state minimum was $7.25. My new job was paying me $11 an hour. I said, yeah, that's not going to happen. I don't care who you get to come in, lady. It isn't me. I'm a travel nurse that works in surgery. In my field, we frequently have to be on call, where we have to sit around at home after our normal hours. If we are called, in this instant, by the hospital operator, we come in for whatever surgery they need us to work. This one place I worked gave me all sorts of problems, from trying to do me out of pay to giving me the worst assignments, to flat out assigning me to be on call more often than others. When it was finally about time for me to leave, I was over everything about that department. I did notice, however, that they had me on the schedule as being on call several times, up to 2 to 3 weeks after my contract had ended. I ignored it and gleefully went on to my next assignment. About 2 weeks later, my phone rang with a Kentucky phone number. It was 5 a.m. on a Saturday, so I ignored it. They called 2 more times before I picked up, and the conversation went like this. Me. Hello? Operator.
Is this McNew? Why didn't you answer the first few calls? You are on call. You are required to answer.
Me. First, yes, I am McNew. Second, I didn't feel like answering those calls at 5 a.m. Third, I can assure you I am not on call. Operator.
Yes, you are. You need to come in. One of the doctors wants to do
Insert non-emergent elective surgery here.
at 7 a.m.
Me. Lady, there's no way I'm going to make it there by 7 a.m. She interrupts me.
Why not? You are responsible for responding to being called in within 30 minutes, which I will be tracking from my first call that you ignored.
Me. Listen, I'm currently an 11-hour drive away. I do not work at your hospital anymore. I suggest you get a hold of the surgery department's manager. Operator.
Oh, okay. I'll try that.
I lay back down, and 15 minutes later, I get another call. I answer, and I immediately recognize the shrill voice. Department manager.
Why aren't you going into work? You are expected to be responsible when on call.
Me. Well, if I factor in the time zone difference, it will be about 5 p.m. before I arrive. How do you not realize the person you are yelling at hasn't worked for you for weeks? DM then hits me with the absolute silliest question.
Well, who am I supposed to get to cover this call and come into work?
Me. I truly do not care. I suppose the manager could go in and take care of it though. Click. I hung up the phone and thankfully did not receive any more calls. Am I the jerk for leaving a meal at my partner's friend's house and stranding him there? My partner's friends and I have never got on very well. Our personalities just don't gel, and apart from my partner, we have nothing in common. One of them decided to throw a dinner party. They asked about allergies, and I actually have a pretty unusual one. I come out in rashes if I eat lychee, which really upsets me because I love lychee. Anyway, I told them about this allergy, even though hardly anyone uses lychee in recipes. Can you see where this is going? The evening arrives. I don't drink anyway, so I drive us both to their house. The dinner party begins. It's going quite nicely. Conversation is pleasant. Then they serve the starter. It has lychee in it. Thinking about how much effort they had to go to obtain and think of a savory dish, I was pretty angry but held it in. Then the main had lychee too. This is the point where I walked out. In fact, I walked home. It was only about 5 miles, and the walk helped clear my head. I ignored the phone calls from my partner, although I did message to say I was safely home. I had forgotten I was my partner's lift home. He got a taxi back a couple of hours later, and we had an argument where he thought I was wrong for leaving him unable to get home. He had had a bottle of wine by the time I left, and I was upset that he hadn't told his friends that what they had done was not how you treat people that you've invited to your house. I was also upset that he had stayed there anyway. If my friends had treated him like that, I'd have left their house along with him. Who is right and wrong? Both? Neither? Edit. This blew up overnight. Sorry I can't reply to everyone individually. Events of the next day. First, he woke up extra early, walked over there and retrieved my car so I wouldn't have to. Turns out, he phoned the taxi about 10 minutes after I had left. He showed me the log, so most of the time he spent there was waiting for the taxi. He did confront them and asked them what they were playing at. Turns out it was some sort of revenge for a barbecue a month earlier that had included vegetarian and halloumi skewers that we brought. One of his friends is lactose intolerant. He said that he's actually the one who prepared those. He didn't know his friend was lactose intolerant, and even if it had been me being deliberate, this isn't the way adults respond. If they had a problem with it, they should have said so at the point, not cooked up a nasty revenge. They messaged him after he left, and his reply is he'll accept their apology if and when I do. For some people asking, they did know it's a rash-level allergy, not a death-level allergy. They wanted to make me uncomfortable, which is still horrible. So yeah, turns out he does stand up to them when really pushed. Edit 2. I don't think they actually intended me to eat it. I feel like if it was the goal, they'd have disguised it within the dishes. There were whole lychee on top of the dish. I think it was meant to be obvious to me that they were in there with the intention of feeling left out rather than harmed. Speaking of allergies, do you have anything you're allergic to? And if so, what is it? Please let us know.
I'm allergic to thumbs downs, so please give the video a thumbs up instead. Thank you.
Come watch this video next, you're gonna love it.
And to have us make a video for you, head over to our Fiverr, link pinned in the comments below.